on the road to victory. All through the revolution he fought at Lenin's side, and they made a combination till the day that Lenin died. He said, come on, you people, we must work with brain and hand. And then one day the Nazis came into the Soviet land. They plundered to the Volga, to Stalingrad. And then Joe Stalin said, come on, me boys, and kicked them out again. Oh, Stalin was a southerner, in Georgia he was born, where the oranges grow thick and fast and fields of waving corn. And Stalin is a farmer, his fingers they are green, and he has planted the biggest crop the world has ever seen. One day he looked upon the map and frowned and shook his head. There's too much brown and not enough green, these were the words he said. We'll have to change the weather, boys, he said, and then he smiled. So let's begin by planting trees along 3,000 miles. So Stalin rolled his sleeves up then and said it's time to start. The Volga River and the Don, they are too far apart. I think we'd better join them, so come and help me, pal, and we'll build a mighty waterway, the Volga-Don Canal. Then Stalin went into the north, and there saw rivers three, all emptying their waters into the polar sea. Now that's not right, Joe Stalin said, these rivers, they are ours. We'll turn them round and make them work and make electric power. There was a range of mountains that were standing in the way, so Stalin put his hand out and smoothed them all away. For Joe, he is determined to make the land all green, and that's the biggest project that the world has ever seen. Oh, Stalin is a mighty man, and he has a mighty plan. He's harnessed nature to the plow to work for the good of man. He's hammered out the future, the fortune he has seen, and he's made the worker state the best the world has ever seen.
전체의 사회주의를 우리 어떻게 성대로 지키는가를 세계여 보라. 조선은 결심하면 한다. 조선은 한다면 한다. 백성의 영도 따라서 선군의 붉은 기 그 신념으로 조선은 결심하면 한다. 조선은 한다면 한다. 조체의 강성대국을 우리 어떻게 땅에 세우는가를 세계여 보라. 조선은 결심하면 한다. 조선은 한다면 한다. 장군님의 뜻을 받들어 불굴의 정신력 그 배짱으로 조선은 결심하면 한다. 조선은 한다면 한다. 조선은 결심하면 한다. 조선은 한다면 한다. Ягод негнар тим терекчи
진달하게 대복시나 어던지니 헌칠색 어거지민 헌칠색 내 때문이 조스테호궁 내린지 바다를 올려쇼
Le Vietnam brûle et moi je hurle Mao, Mao. Johnson rigole et moi je vole Mao, Mao. Le napalm coule et moi je roule Mao, Mao. Les villes crèvent et moi je rêve Mao, Mao. Les putains crient et moi je ris Mao, Mao. Le riz est fou et moi je joue Mao, Mao.
C'est le petit livre rouge.
L'impérialisme dicte partout sa loi. La révolution n'est pas un dîner. La bomba est un tigre en papier. Les masses sont les véritables héros. Les ricains tuent et moi je mue Mao Mao. Les fous sont rois et moi je bois Mao Mao. Les bombes tonnent et moi je sonne Mao Mao. Les bébés fuient et moi je fuis Mao Mao. Les Russes mangent et moi je danse Mao Mao. Diable dénonce, je renonce Mao Mao.
C'est le petit livre rouge qui fait que tout enfin bouge.
La base de l'armée, c'est le soldat. Le vrai pouvoir est au bout du fusil. Les monstres seront tous anéantis. L'ennemi ne périt pas de lui-même. Mao Mao. Mao Mao. Mao Mao. Mao Mao.
When I was young, I used to be as fine a man as ever you'd see in the Prince of Wales. He said to me, come and join the British Army. Tee-oo-ra-loo-ra-loo-ra-loo, they're looking for monkeys up in the zoo. It says, one, if I had a face like you, I'd join the British Army. Sarah Connan baked a cake and so for poor old Slattery sake, sure I threw myself into the lake pretending I was barmy. Tee-oo-ra-loo-ra-loo-ra-loo, I've made me mind up what to do. Now I'll work me ticket home to you and the British Army. Sergeant Healy went away and his wife got in the family way, and the only words that she could say was blame the British Army. Tee-oo-ra-loo-ra-loo-ra-loo, me curse upon the Labour Blue that took me darling boy from me to join the British Army. Corporal Sheen is a terrible note, just give him a couple of jars of stout and he bait the enemy with his mouth and save the British Army. Tee-oo-ra-loo-ra-loo-ra-loo, I've made me mind up what to do. Now I'll work me ticket home to you and the British Army.
Ich trage eine Fahne und diese Fahne ist rot. Es ist die Arbeiterfahne, die Vater trug durch die Not. Die Fahne ist niemals gefallen, so oft auch der Träger fiel. Sie weht heute über uns allen und sieht schon der Sehnsucht ziehen. Ich trage eine Fahne, das Rot der Arbeiter macht. Es hat die Arbeiterfahne bei Nacht mein Vater bewacht und hat sie mir früh übergeben, als Morgenrot stieg empor, dass wir sie zur Sonne heben, bei Tag in der Kampfe schwor. Ich trage eine Fahne und diese Fahne ist rot. Es ist die Arbeiterfahne, die uns die Einheit gebot. Sie hat unsere Väter begleitet durch Schade und Nacht und Krieg. Drum vorwärts die Söhne erstreiten, zu Ende
Разовьем мы березу, разовьем мы кудряву. Ой да дай да, ой да дай да, разовьем мы кудряву.
Утреннего в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, веют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы. Будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы.
Продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди.
С неба милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути.
Продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди. Не стой, снегопад, не реке верный богат. Юности планеты, наш всемирный твой отряд. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди. Продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный отряд впереди.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome along. It is the evening of January the 8th. The time is just after 10:30, and here we are with a live stream looking at Trump, the new American Caesar, or is he? How many states is he going to add, or are there going to be states taken off the grand total? These are the questions which we will be addressing tonight. And before we get there, I will course make a shameless plug for the article that I wrote earlier today. It's a brief one that I dashed off in response to the quite frankly ludicrous and hysterical takes on this. Now, if you're not aware, what we're going to be talking about is Trump and his various comments about Greenland, about Canada, about Panama, about Mexico. And we're going to seek to delineate what is a real strategic move on behalf of US imperialism and what is Trump being Trump, blustering and bullshitting for all he's worth. But before we get to that, we will be doing a traditional greeting to the chat. So who have we got here? We have Comrade Ian Foster. We have Jenny doing the moderating. Thank you for being here and doing the job tonight. We have Nessa, hello to you, who joins us from Tottenham in North London. Now, unless I'm very much mistaken, Nessa, you've actually just won a game. If you are indeed a Tottenham fan, yes, you have, beating Liverpool 1-0 in the first leg of the English League Cup. So that's a bit of a rarity for you guys. Enjoy that while it lasts. Hello to Comrade Jawad, who joins us from the western part of Perfidious Albion. Hello to Abtin, up there in the land of Sweden. Hello to Keith, and hello to Comrade Daniel out there in the West Country. And Arcane Eclectic, who says there is nothing Trump could give Denmark as proper payment for Greenland. Well, we'll come to that. Alexander Lukter, hello to you, who says, Conturba e impera, confuse and rule, is the motto of Caesar, Napoleon, God, Emperor, Trump. Yeah, well, that's how some of his fan base actually does think of him. So we also have with us tonight Albert, who joins us from the Republic of Croydon. I didn't realize that you guys had gone UDI. Good luck to you. And we have Jonathan C. We have Kawa Justiniano. We have Dan Lindstrom saying, good evening to all. Sweden is a funny country, planning new cemeteries for NATO soldiers. Yeah, that's... Sweden, basically, along with most of the ruling classes of Europe, are essentially just becoming a death cult now. It's almost as if the ruling class collectively, the capitalist classes of Europe and Britain, know they're fucked and basically are just drifting towards some kind of oblivion now. Hence the constant self-destruction. I mean, I'm being slightly flippant there. The reality is that they are in a very deep crisis and have no real way of getting out of it. And so what seems to us like self-destruction is just a endless series of choices made by policymakers of zero or limited vision, because they can't see beyond the narrow framework and tight restrictions of late-stage imperialism. And so everything they do looks destructive and random and strange to us, because it's a bunch of very, very clueless individuals in charge of a system which is so brittle it can't be changed. All right, so hello to Bruce Albert, and we've also got with us, who else is here? Jonathan Foster, Yen Zidek, Agricola Urbanus. Dan Lindstrom says, I think Max Blumenthal has to refresh his Parenti and Lenin settings. Well, that goes for many of us from time to time, but one should never... I mean, if I were to make any criticism of Max and the Grey Zone crew, I'd say that more of them should read Stalin and Mao in a serious way. Again, that is a criticism you could level at many people. Sun Chu joins us from Algeria. Good to have somebody from that nation of historic and heroic struggles joining us. Owen Sanders, hello to you. Stig Pedersen joins us from Copenhagen, soon to be the capital of Trump Land East. I jest only slightly. Tim Gray is with us, as is Davey. Good evening to you, comrade. And who else have we got here? We have Jonathan C. We have Niall Fraser, who's coming to us from Hong Kong, Special Administrative Region of the People's Republic of China. Robert joins us from the wasteland of Staten Island. Steve Choate is joining us from Ringgold, Georgia. Citizen Scriv, good evening to you. Aziz, hello to you. Jonathan Collins is with us from the wild wasteland of Merseyside. Caustic Grip is here, joining us from what is described as Londinium. Maybe we never outgrew the Romans, Caustic Grip. Maybe we didn't. Hello to Yep X, who says, earlier today I was dealing with right-wingers who said Hitler was a socialist, that communism killed 100 million people, along with many other lies, propaganda. Well, this is a frequently recurring topic, and it leads me to think that this is something that I should do a specific show on. Do let me know in the comments if you're enthusiastic about this idea, where I just address common reactionary lies about communism for, say, a couple of hours. So I would I'm trying to think of the best way to do this on the fly. Maybe the best way to do it is if either I start off with like just a few basic explanations of the most why the most common lies are, wild and made up bullshit, and then I just take questions from you guys for like an hour and a half, 2 hours or something, where you just throw every single thing you've ever heard in terms of an anti-communist myth at me, and I spend a couple of hours answering them. If you're enthusiastic to hear that, do let me know in the comments. Caustic Grip, hello. Oh, I already said hello to you. Citizen Scriv, greetings to you out there in Birmingham. Birmingham, a land in which I spent many years. Interesting place, Birmingham. It very much has a different, or I should say 20 years ago, it had a different feel to it than Manchester does. I haven't been back there enough to judge it recently, though. There is the horrible tendency of late stage capitalism to flatten out all regional differences. And being a small land as we are here in Perfidious Albion, I always rather enjoyed our regional differences. They're still there if you know where to go. But those who rule this country have a nasty tendency to just flatten everything out and make all the culture as boring as possible. Hello to Edward, who's a Latvian studying on an Erasmus Plus exchange program for 5 months in Iceland, a Latvian communist, that is. Red salute to Edward, who's over there in Iceland at the moment. See if you can hook up with the Icelandic comrades. Tony Mack, hello to you out there in Ireland. Christopher Rogers, hello to you. Upachaos Jim joined us from Novi Sad, Serbia. Greetings to you, or should I say zdravo. David King says, Trump wanting Greenland and Canada, is this to keep BlackRock and Vanguard happy after Project Ukraine failed? More on that in just a moment. Hello to Smitumi, joining us from the West Midlands. Hello to Michael, joining us from Belfast, capital of the occupied 6 counties of Ireland. Seems to be some enthusiasm for the idea of the anti-communist myth-busting program. Hello to Davey, who says, remember when Obama said he'd been to 57 states and had 1 more to go? Well, maybe he was being more real than we thought. Caustic Grip says, found out recently that Hong Kong has no postcodes. You can send letters to Hong Kong by simply writing a string of zeros. Interesting. Might need to do it. Okay. Jenny says a big yes to the anti-communist myth-busting program. Our Serbian friend, Upachaos Jim, says, do it please, especially the BS about communism and the October Revolution was a Judeo-Freemasonry project. Yeah, that's something the Russian reactionaries say a lot. Actually, I've heard Russian reactionaries say that it was either a German plot, a British plot, a Jewish plot, an American plot, or all of the above. Anything but the truth. Anything but the truth, which is that the workers and peasants embraced communism and embraced the idea and the reality of building a workers and peasants state. Right. Okay. Coming to the end of the comments here. Okay. So, right. Hello also to Yuan, joining us from Phoenix, Arizona. So, unless you have been living under a rock for the past week or so, maybe some of you have, you will not have not failed to notice the tendency of a certain Mr. Donald Trump, who is now president-elect of the United States, of which more in just a moment, making all kinds of threats to various countries, the usual threats to the people of the West Asian region of the world. Of course, we would expect that from a blood-soaked coward such as Trump, but also threats to Panama over the Panama Canal, threats to Mexico over various things, threats to the Canadians, and threats to the Danish over Greenland. So what is Trump's game is the question. Now, here we should delineate clearly the things about this that are real and represent strategic shifts amongst some elements of US imperialism, and the bits of this which are just Trump essentially mouthing off. So in order to understand Trump himself, let's say we should look up the man through his own works. And of course, his own work is The Art of the Deal, even though he, of course, was only a co-writer on that. But he says this about deals in that. And I did look this up. I actually started to I read a chapter from The Art of the Deal earlier today. And Trump says in that, I like thinking big. I always have. To me, it's very simple. If you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big. Most people think small because most people are afraid of success, afraid of making decisions, afraid of winning. And that gives people like me a great advantage. That and inheriting a real estate empire off your father, of course. But this is the way that Trump does business a lot of the time. When he wants something, he generally tends to start off by making a series of outlandish and outrageous claims or staking claims to things he knows he's not going to get. And he says that in the book. So this is the way that Trump does business. He makes rather crude and grandiose statements as an opening position. So all the talk about taking over Canada as the 51st state, the talk about, absorbing Greenland into the United States, this is mostly garbage in terms of the idea that they would directly take these places over. Now, it's mostly garbage because you have to consider the practical realities of what it would mean to actually take over places like Canada, places like Greenland. Now, Canada is a vast territory. It's huge. A lot of it uninhabited, of course. Its population is around about 40 odd million. So relatively small population, huge area. There is, of course, quite a lot of minerals there. There's oil, there's minerals to be mined. There's profitable sectors of the economy there to be exploited. So certain American capitalists might want access to that, but they could get access to that anyway without taking over the bloody place. You get yourself into a position where, as a declining imperial power, you're suddenly going to absorb this gigantic territory, which you've then got to manage with 40 million people, the great majority of which don't really want to become American citizens. Even if the compradors that run the country decide to invite you in, there's no guarantee that the rest of the population is going to go along with you. And what you end up with is a giant problem. So why on earth would the American ruling class want to actually be in the business of governing Canada when they could get everything they want out of Canada by simply applying the most moderate amount of pressure to the collection of weaklings, bozos, and sex offenders that run the place? Case in point, Justin Trudeau, who is probably all three of those. So why on earth would you bother taking over Canada? I mean, that's mainly Trump being just grandiose in his rhetoric. Now, I said in the article I wrote earlier that what Trump is actually after, or more to the point, it's not really about Trump. What about the American ruling class? What are they actually after in Canada? Well, they're after mineral rights. They're after deregulation of the Canadian economy so that they can get even further embedded in there in terms of their acquisition of Canadian assets. They want the Canadians to spend more on defense and, of course, even further integrate their armed forces into being essentially an appendage of the US. And this is the most crucial thing when it comes to both Canada and Greenland, they want that Arctic trade route sealed off, particularly to China. That's Trump's obsession. But in the wider ruling class who are feeding him this stuff, it's also about Russia. So you see this Arctic trade route being used more. Now it's the Northwest Passage is very much a reality. So you want to use the areas that you can control if you're the United States. So that's the areas north of Canada, the areas around Greenland. You want to control those shipping lanes that are emerging, which the Chinese or the Russians could be using, and you want to shut them out of it for various reasons. Either you want to shut them out of it to keep them permanently out of it, or you want to shut them out of it to extract some sort of concession, put pressure on the Chinese. That's the way that Trump will be considering it. So the bozo who's going to be the next prime minister of Canada, this absolute blank space of anonymity, this absolute zero named Pierre Poilievre. I've mispronounced his name. I don't care. I don't believe that this guy's even a real person. He seems like some sort of composite character made out of the various different parts of like US reactionary obsessions. So Monsieur Poilievre issued a unique statement which was both feisty and spineless at the same time. He says Canada will never be the 51st state, period. Easy thing to say because it was never serious. Again, the American ruling class, the US ruling class, does not want to be in the business of having to manage all of this territory. Look at the way they can't even manage their own territory. Look at how many places inside the current continental United States are falling to fucking pieces. Yeah. I mean, you don't need to go far to find the evidence, and you don't need to of that. You don't even need to be some kind of Marxist to observe it. There's plenty of YouTube videos of like just some guy who does like travel blogs walking around some town in, I don't know, Ohio or Mississippi or Alabama, or even in some places in the northern United States or Detroit, you know, former center of US industry, just looking at the place and it's all fallen down. Or that town that John the Corpse Fetterman used to be the mayor of. You know, this is a ruling class in the United States which has just given up on actually investing in huge areas of its own country, because this is what later stage imperialism looks like. Most of the money goes elsewhere to places where you can return greater profit on it via hyper exploiting people. You can't do that as yet in large areas of the United States. They've just been left to go to rack and fucking ruin. So what, are we saying suddenly that they're going to be interested in taking on the job of managing all of this territory? No, of course they're not. Not when they can get everything out of the likes of Poilievre. I'm going to pronounce his name differently every time. Without having to take over the difficult business of taking things away from Canadian citizens, which they actually value. So taking their healthcare away, putting them on the American system, lowering wages, that kind of thing. That's difficult. It's much easier if you can get some stooge to do it for you and cost less money. You can get everything you want out of them in terms of concessions over mineral rights, access to Canadian markets, using Canada as a base for resource extraction, that kind of thing, without actually having to manage the place. But to return to the point about Monsieur Poilievre, who's issued this groveling statement in a tweet, which makes it clear that he's heard Trump's real message loud and clear and is now going to prostrate himself before the obese orange emperor. So he says, I'm not going to do the accent, by the way. We are a great and independent country. Well, that's contestable. We are the best friend to the US. We spent billions of dollars and hundreds of lives helping Americans retaliate against Al-Qaeda and the 9/11 attacks. We supply the US with billions of dollars of high quality and totally reliable energy well below market prices. We buy hundreds of billions of dollars of American goods. It is so pathetic. It's like he's sat there going, Mr. Trump, please, we're already groveling before you. We're already letting you rip us off. We're already sending hundreds of Canadians to die in your colonial wars, sparked by that, let's just call it, shall we say, a provocation on 9/11, 2001, which was chalked up to a group called Al-Qaeda, which works for the US. We've already sacrificed hundreds of Canadians and probably thousands more with the, shell shock living on inside Canada right now for your colonial wars. You're already ripping us off for our oil. We're already buying your inferior quality, overpriced goods. Please, Mr. Trump, let us continue to be your doormat. In fact, I'm going to lie down right here, right now, and allow you to wipe your feet on the back of my neck. That's how much I'm standing up for Canada, by lying flat on the ground with my face in the dirt before you. That's not in the tweet, by the way. I'm just improvising now. He goes on. Our weak and pathetic NDP Liberal government has failed to make these obvious points. So Monsieur Poilievre is saying that blackface Trudeau and and Singh haven't groveled enough. Well, perhaps that's true. I will fight for Canada by pushing myself further into the dirt and allowing you to tap dance on the back of my skull. When I am Prime Minister, we will rebuild our military and take back control of the border to secure both Canada and the US. This is such ridiculous bullshit. It's like, yeah, because the Canadian-US border is, in and out of control crisis. Of course it is. We'll take back control of our Arctic to keep Russia and China out. And there's the big one. That's possibly more than anything else. That's the big thing that the US imperialists are after. Militarization of the Arctic, if it hasn't been already, and the shutting out of Russian and Chinese shipping. That's what this is really all about, mostly. There is, of course, never just one reason for any particular event, though. So the prostrate Poilievre continues to babble with his mouth firmly pressed onto the ring of Donald Trump. We will axe taxes, slash red tape, and rapidly greenlight massive resource projects to bring home paychecks and production to our country. In other words, we will put Canada first. I mean, this is just vomit-inducing garbage. I mean, it's so feeble when, like, British, Canadian, Australian, or Kiwi politicians start trying to talk like Trump. It's like not even other Americans can do it. Yeah, you see like some American politicians trying to sound like Trump, and it just doesn't work. It's like you see DeSantis trying to do it, and it's just like comes across as like a nerdy guy trying to sort of grovel before the some sort of high school jock. And when a Canadian tries to do it, it just, oh God, it makes you want to vomit. We will put Canada first. I said I wasn't going to do an impression, but I have probably just defended the entire Quebecois listenership. So, désolé, mes amis. So the essential point of this comes down to, as I said, the Arctic trade routes, keeping the Russians and the Chinese out, and greenlighting massive resource projects. So further exploitation of Canadian energy, maybe by American corporations, maybe in some partnership with Canadian ones, but certainly with American corporations being favored. Further deregulation of the Canadian economy. What does that mean? Axing taxes, slashing red tape. Well, we know what that means. It means cutting taxes on the richest and the people in Canada and corporations. Slashing red tape means, of course, deregulating the workplace. Things like health and safety regulations, things like union rights. What Poilievre is declaring here is essentially that he will, as the duly appointed representative of American imperialism in Canada, which is all, by the way, the Canadian Prime Minister has been since the days when they were the duly appointed representative of British imperialism, that he will obediently do whatever the fuck it is that the US ruling class wants him to do. That's what he's committing to in this tweet. And Trump, as the representative of American imperialism, has already won. He's already getting the Canadian political class to do everything that he wants. And Trudeau would have done all of this as well, by the way, but he's decided he wants to duck out and spend more time with his trans black self. So Poilievre just shows us what this is all about. This is about US imperialism getting even greater control over Canada, over its resources, over its land, and over its trade routes, and keeping Russians and the Chinese out. That is what the Canada thing is all about. They're not going to take control of it, even though that would be kind of funny for a few minutes. They're not going to walk in and occupy it. This isn't on the agenda. They can get everything they want out of it just by applying pressure to the stooges in Ottawa, who will just roll over, as they always do. So the Greenland thing is pretty similar. I mean, they're looking for mineral rights there. There's a lot of rare earth metals there, or a decent amount anyway, that the US ruling class wants to get hold of. They will get hold of those, I'm sure. And they'll probably want to establish more of a military presence there. Bear in mind, though, that Greenland being formally part of Denmark, even though it's got a very heavy degree of autonomy, it's already in NATO. So the US could stick its bases there whenever it likes. I think it's more about the trade routes, and it's more about gaining access to the as much of the rare earth metals there as they possibly can. So that's what the Greenland thing is about. They're not going to directly occupy it. They're not going to incorporate it into the United States. This is just Trump and his crew getting, ideas above their station. When confronted with the difficulties of actually governing a place, they won't be interested. Not when you can asset strip a place without ever setting a single American boot inside of it, or very few American boots inside of it. Now, to move on to the Panama thing, this might be a little bit more real, given the history of the US and the Panama Canal. But again, that's much more likely to be about shutting Russian and Chinese shipping out of the Panama Canal than it is about reoccupying the Panama Canal zone. They may do that because that's a much more, shall we say, or it's a slightly easier job than occupying Canada or Greenland, given that the US used to occupy the Panama Canal zone. So they may do that in extremis, but I think that what they will be aiming to do is to basically pressure the Panamanians to change the rules regarding Chinese and Russian access to it. And then the Chinese and the Russians will innovate a way around that anyway. So it's not going to do them a lot of good. Mexico, I think, it's a slightly more dangerous prospect. I've discussed before that I think there is a great deal of danger facing the Mexicans from US imperialism. There always has been. But again, this is not just Trump trolling or bloviating. There's many US politicians and wider sort of public figures in the US who have consistently mentioned waging some kind of anti-terrorist so-called campaign against the cartels. I got a book review on the cartels coming up pretty soon when I finished it. Very, very interesting stuff. More on that in future episodes. But the risk of some kind of American covert or possibly overt military operation against Mexico, that's higher, I would say. It would still be disastrous if Trump or anybody else tried it, but there's a lot of people inside the power structure of the United States who are into this idea. And there's a lot of morons in Congress who would happily approve it under the old AUMF. All they've got to do is say, oh, look, Al-Qaeda or whoever else has turned up in Mexico. They're working with the cartels. We must bomb them. This is something which, again, Democrats have talked about it. Republicans have talked about it. Trump's circle has talked about it. And their motivation has nothing to do with cartels. It's nothing to do with supposed terrorist organizations. It's everything to do with the strategic alignment of Mexico and the current composition of its government. That's what it's about. And Sheinbaum, following Lopez Obrador, is proving thus far to be a capable leader. Yes, a reformist. No point lying about that. And certainly not a communist, but somebody who heads a movement which is not only very popular, but which can mobilize in its support huge numbers of the Mexican working class and the wider Mexican masses, which is developing, it seems, from my inexpert eyes. And I am going to seek to have a Mexican comrade on at some point soon to talk in more detail about the situation in the country than I can. But from looking at this outside, though I would like to go to Mexico one day. I went to the border in 1997, but that's not really the same thing. But looking at it from the outside, it seems that AMLO and now Sheinbaum head a movement which has deep roots inside the Mexican masses. It's getting stronger and more effective as a government as time goes on. It has pretty easily defeated the old and very corrupt comprador parties in the Mexican system, and is showing that it intends to pursue an independent policy when it comes to the global affairs and relations with other countries. So they have good relations, for instance, with Venezuela and Cuba, and as far as I'm aware, with Nicaragua as well. So that's something that the US imperialists will very much not want, and that alone would give them motivation to try and destabilize Sheinbaum's presidency. She so far has taken the right position on this, which is basically turning around to Trump's suggestion of renaming the Gulf of Mexico or other such pathetic nonsense, with a bite back saying, well, we'll rename loads of American states to be Mexican American or something like that. Which of course she could do on a map. You can do anything you can do whatever the fuck you like on maps produced in your country. It doesn't mean anything. So the threat to Mexico, I think, is a bit more real, even though I think it would still be a disastrous miscalculation of the U.S. imperialists to think that they can just go and bomb Mexico and get away with it. I think it would trigger a lot of opposition inside the United States itself if they were to do that. So overall, though, and my overall judgment on this is that this is a recognition by some elements in the U.S. imperialist machine that the gambit in Ukraine has failed. That this big game they were playing there for over 30 years has ended in disaster. That they're not going to win. That they're going to take a big loss on this thing, and that's going to compromise their position within Europe. I think it's going to call into question the effectiveness of NATO as an organization, and the effectiveness also of the European Union as an entity which, of course, was sponsored by US imperialism, still is. And this necessitates something of a realignment. Now, I don't think that by any means that the great bulk of the American ruling class is on board with this idea of concentrating their domination to the Western Hemisphere, to the Americas. Nor do I think it is going to be an easy job for them to try and destroy the governments which are their major targets. So I mentioned Mexico. That will certainly be one they will try to undermine or act aggressively against. But we should not forget, of course, that the primary countries in the firing line of US imperialism in the Americas remain those countries that are either socialist or on a revolutionary path. So Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. Bolivia, slightly different question. There's some big question marks over Luis Arce and what role he's playing. I shall come back to that in future episodes. But certainly Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba are going to be subjected to intense campaigns of harassment, intimidation, and violence by US imperialism, as they have been in the past. Now, I think that they are, all three of them, in a strong position to resist that. Certainly in places like Nicaragua and Venezuela, the role of the masses there is the best defense, as it is in Cuba, against US imperialism. And even in Cuba, which has had its problems, you're starting to see the Russians and the Chinese come through more with assistance now. Either the Russians are helping to repair the energy system there. Certainly, it seems to me, from looking at this from Perfidious Albion, the Chinese leadership under Xi Jinping is seemingly very committed to aiding Cuba. And if they're committed to it, and the Cuban party remains strong, its links with the masses remain strong, and its alliances with the Russians and the Chinese start to pay off more seriously, I don't think that the US's various attempts at color revolutions are going to work. Trump will probably try something even more crude, such as probably renewed terrorist campaigns or some kind of provocation. But again, I think that the Cuban Revolution is still strong enough to fight this off. So this is, to bring my remarks on this to a conclusion, this is a recognition by some elements in the US ruling class that their gambits elsewhere have failed, so they better try and concentrate control over the Americas and the Caribbean. I don't think it's going to work. It's too late for that now. Too much time has passed, and US imperialism has become too weak to assert itself in this way. They will, of course, doubtless try, and it will create more chaos inside the American heartland itself. And this is how we should look at this. Trump's comments are just his way of delivering what is a recalculation on behalf of certain elements within the US ruling class. And well, just to conclude on this point, this is part of the reason why Trump has so far enjoyed a smooth path to the presidency. If you disregard those assassination attempts as provocations, which I think they were, the Democrats have basically just rolled over. They've offered even less resistance to Trump this time than they did to George W. Bush. And the answer as to why that has happened is because, well, Trump has thoroughly integrated himself with a powerful section of the US ruling class, principally the tech scumbags like Musk himself, Peter Thiel, etc. He's got some very powerful backers in the US ruling class, probably more so than he did the first time round. And so, therefore, it is clear there's no scope for undermining him too much, given that he's got some very powerful elements of the capitalist class behind him in a more serious way this time. And also, I mean, I will bring back a prediction I made all the way back in 2021, which is that when the crisis facing US imperialism got worse and there was potentially more discontent inside the heartland there amongst the working class, then the ruling class in the United States would start to embrace Trump more openly and see him as a potential barrier to, shall we say, the development of further working class consciousness. If you can hold out a fake populist in front of them, they hope that the working class will be conned by all the shit that Trump comes out with. So we will now be pausing to take questions on this particular topic. Okay. Hello to others who are joining us. Just scrolling up here. Right, bear with me a moment. This is why I need like a pause on the comments function. Okay, so hello to Morgan, who joins us from Cork. Agricola Urbana says, Nazi economy was basically a capitalist pyramid scheme based on the war against the Soviet Union being won. Yes. Everything was basically predicated on the idea they would have a country which they could subject to unlimited exploitation and slavery. Thankfully, it didn't work. Okay, you were enjoying the Trump impersonation. Hello to Verena Fraser, who joins us. Let's go through here. Winston Fahrenheit says, what do you think about Kinnock, the crook, pompous old git from CND, to being in the Daily Mail calling for more money for missiles? I think that Kinnock, senior and junior, know which side their bread is buttered, and the bread is buttered by imperialism. Hence why you go from being the big-time left-winger in 1972 to being the big-time right-wing sellout in 1985. Kinnock knows who pays the bills, and who pays the bills is the ruling class in this country. And a coward and a weakling and an intellectual eunuch like Kinnock would sell his own mother for cash. Let's face it. And this man sold out his working class background for a peerage, for a non-job at the European Commission, for several pensions. I mean, I'm not a religious man. I wasn't raised to be religious, so I don't believe in heaven or hell. But if there is such a place as hell, and I know I'm aware that we do have some Christian and Muslim followers and some Jewish followers. If you're from any of the other major religions, give us a shout out. You all have various conceptions of hell, I do believe. Certainly the Abrahamic faiths do. But if we assume, for instance, for a moment, let's deal with the Abrahamic conception of hell, or maybe we use Dante's version of the several circles of hell. The lowest circle of hell being reserved for traitors, then that's where Neil Kinnock belongs. Neil Kinnock, if you're not familiar with who I'm talking about or who Winston's question relates to, you can Google this fucking guy. He was a leader of the Labour Party in the 1980s, played a key role in selling out the miners' strike, and was rewarded for it, which is what happens if you're a nominal workers' leader who sells out the working class to the ruling class, undermines struggles or destroys struggles via treachery and scabbing, then you'll get a peerage out of it. If you're British, of course, you'll get to sit in the House of Lords on £300 a day expenses. So you can basically sit there half asleep on the red benches as a member of the vermin in ermine, absorbing expenses and absorbing complimentary wine until you die in the House of Lords, age 90, and are ceremonially buried by being catapulted into the Thames. I made up the last part, but that's who Kinnock is. A working class man, or a man from a working class background, who sold out every single fucking thing. And it's sickening to see that the bastard is still lingering around screaming for more war. But again, he knows who pays his bills, and he's a loyal servant of British imperialism, and he always has been. Arcane Eclectic said, I have nothing against the American Constitution. However, the US has not had a constitutional government in decades, so I want no part of it. Interesting. Fair point. Caustic Grip says, I feel like Trump watches South Park. Maybe not Trump, but I think people who write for him do. Daniel says it should be fun watching Trump fail to achieve any of this. More than likely. Opa Chaos and Jim. I know you told me how to pronounce that name, but I've scrolled too far down the comments, so I apologize for the mispronunciation. The next Prime Minister of Canada might be the granddaughter of the Ukrainian Nazi. I think probably, well, might be, but she will take the exact same attitude to Trump as Poilievre does, which is groveling. Poilievre is literally the Canadian version of Trump. Well, that's just sad, you know. Sad. It's just like pathetic stuff. Verena Fraser says that's him in a nutshell. Spicy but spineless. Kind of like a really bad pub snack. Alexia Olson says Poilievre is the Canadian Trump. He will get it in to bring austerity here too. Yeah. I mean, the agenda is, in all of these countries in the West, like as it has been for years now, full-blown attacks on the bulk of the working class. And that's what Poilievre will be delivering. Pittsburgh Dude 87 says, Fetterman used to be the mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, quite near me. The town's named after the British general Edward Braddock. Yeah, I think he was on there. It was actually Tucker Carlson's segment, I think I saw about Fetterman. And I think, in fairness, Carlson made the accurate point that the guy was a completely fucking useless mayor who basically just spent his time in charge of the city, wandering around in a hoodie and gentrifying the place. Stig Pedersen says Greenland can end becoming a US state for free if Greenland votes against Danish colonialism and can choose its own subjugation. Yeah, I hope that the Greenlanders choose something different, like not being subjected to either of these fading powers. Will Poilievre stop old Nazi veterans going to Parliament? Asks David King. No, he'll invite more of them. And some Zionists as well, and they'll get on just fine. TL Orca says, Alaska keeps experiencing small earthquakes near a military base. Wonder if testing weapons. Certainly is certainly a likelihood. I imagine that they would use Alaska. If there's any Alaskans watching, feel free to comment, by the way. They would use Alaska for dangerous experiments because it's inside the United States, but is pretty isolated and is far enough away from the bulk of the US states to get away with doing shady shit in. I've also read a lot of crazy things about Alaska over the years, like some of the crazy stuff that goes on there. Maybe we should do an Alaska show. If they'll let me into the United States, maybe I'll go and do a live stream from Anchorage. Yes, I my Quebecois accent doesn't exist. I've been to Quebec once. It was in 2011, and I can't remember the accent. And I made a fool of myself trying to speak French there as well. If there's any security camera footage of me trying to order a crepe from some Montreal cafe, you'll see what I mean. Stig Pedersen says, coming Canadian Prime Minister is all in for Israel destroying Iran. No changes anywhere. A very hot year coming up. Well, if the Prime Minister of mighty Canada wants to march his forces off to try and fight Iran, I'm sure the Iranians would probably defeat them pretty quickly once they'd all stop laughing. Hello to Jonathan, who joins us from Rumble. Good to have you with us. Citizen Scriv says, US already has full base on Greenland and a lost nuke that's never been recovered. Interesting. I'll have to have a look at that. Agricola Urbana says, I remember the Q-tards back then talked about Iran growing its influence over Mexican cartels. Yes, everybody knows that it's Ayatollah Khamenei who's directing the Mexican cartels. It certainly isn't the CIA. Arcane Eclectic says, personally, I would love to see Mexico join BRICS. Interesting. Be interesting if they did do that. I could see it happening. And ironically, I think Trump's belligerent bullshitting might play a part in pushing them towards it. TL Orca says Chinese should send aid boats to California. Yes. Any Californians watching tonight? Let us know about what the fire situation is like over there. Are Kamala Harris's slave firefighters still working? Yes, thank you, Yepex. Don't forget to like and share the discussion. Yes, we're going to do the debunking anti-communism stream. Probably going to be next week. Caustic Grip says Greenland discovered by Eric the Red, now being rediscovered by Donald the Orange. At least the Vikings used to row their own boats. Alan Smith says, I love how he didn't even consider the opinions of native Greenlanders for a nanosecond. Of course he didn't. Of course he didn't. In its own way, Trump is a much more brutal and honest face for US imperialism. Zoroastrian here, says President Jesus. I believe you're in California, so that's entirely apt. James Graham says, Kinnock, we're all right. We're all right. Yes, that's my Neil Kinnock impersonation. I once was subjected to a Neil Kinnock speech up close and personal. One day I'll tell the story of that. Verena Fraser says, Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of England, will probably be the Liberal leader in Canada. Isn't that, he's like, his reputation as being a sort of stiff, incredibly charismaless banker. So you can settle the Canadian Liberal Party is not going to be backing government anytime soon. What color will the revolutions be in Canada and Greenland? Well, Greenland got to be green. In Canada, maple syrup colors. The maple syrup revolution. Burhava says, aren't constitutions just like the rest of liberalism, hot air designed to distract the masses? Well, like the American Constitution, let's just deal with that for a second. American Constitution is one of the high points of the bourgeois revolutionary period, meaning it's like one of the most revolutionary documents of the period in which saw the rising to power of the capitalist class. So as something which embodies that, it is of great historical significance and should be studied properly. Of course, as soon as these things are committed to paper, and as soon as they become real, should we say, they almost immediately lose their power, because suddenly the truth of them becomes revealed, which is that all these rights that these constitutions, starting with the American Constitution, talk about are essentially rights for property owners. And even when they extend, as has been done in the American case, these rights through amendments to the Constitution to other groups that were initially excluded, what these other groups get is like a partial version at best of the rights enjoyed by the bourgeois. See, that's who the Constitution was originally meant to serve, the bourgeois. The working class has forced its way into their calculations, so they've had to concede certain things. But really, it's a bourgeois constitution for the bourgeoisie. So I wouldn't say it was just hot air, but the idea of it being universally applicable, the idea of everybody inside a particular capitalist country sharing the same rights, that's hot air. So in that sense, you're correct. But it doesn't mean that the Constitution doesn't represent a very real thing in terms of the revolutionary processes that the bourgeoisie in the United States went through and their coming to power, all of which is embodied in the US Constitution. And as I said, that makes it a tremendously significant thing that shouldn't just be dismissed, but it is fundamentally a constitution for the bourgeoisie. Can you comment, asks Edward, on the population decline in industrial countries? Even the DPRK is below replacement rates, 1.8 and not 2.1. Only the old USSR 1990 had a birth rate of 2.3. Yeah, it's an interesting comment, Edward. Interesting question. Certainly, it's something that I will be looking further at. Hello to all 503 of you out there. Apparently, this is a popular time to do a stream. Be sure to like and share the stream if you haven't done so already. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not done so already. Dan Lindstrom says 47 new NATO bases in Nordic countries. That's an awful lot of crap that basically just paints a target on yourselves. Tim Gray says, if you go to Mexico, you must experience the wrestling. Truly brilliant experience. Yeah, I've heard about this. Mexican wrestling is like this huge cultural phenomenon, isn't it? Like I've seen like a couple of like sort of exploitation films from the 50s and 60s where like, what was that Mexican wrestler who became a movie star? Was it Sancho? Who like did movies in Mexico where he was basically like played a superhero. Comment if I've got that right or wrong. Bob Parr says, a recent YouTube video talks about being told Iran streamed over the border, including man pads to the point Trump had to alter his travel plans and use charter aircraft. False flag incoming. Well, false flag incoming, you should probably just assume that given that they've done a series of false flag terror attacks recently or somebody has inside the United States, just assume that false flag incoming is a permanent thing. Alan Smith says, Biden plagiarized Neil Kinnock and torpedoes his presidential campaign in the 80s. Yes, that's correct. I mean, of all the people to fucking rip off, Neil Kinnock, a loser, an arch loser, and Biden ripped him off. I mean, fucking hell. Right. Jenny says, the system does what it does, despite your piece of paper and high ideals. Very true. Yeah, Jonathan C. says, yesterday was windy, which helped fires spread. This is California. Don't know what started these fires now, but previously many wildfires were started by private energy infrastructure because they refused to invest. Well, same story everywhere. The 500 figure is the total number. So we have 275 of you on Twitter or X, 223 of you on YouTube, one on Twitch, and we've got some watching on Rumble as well. El Santo apparently is the wrestler. Interesting. Kind of how the swamp that is Florida was sold to the people in the past. Interesting. Thoughts on Iran, Russia Security Pact, January 17th. Will it ward off empire attacks? Well, I've said for a while, this is in response to a question by David King, the US, of all of the bullshitting about this, the US, I don't think, can successfully attack Iran. We are going to be having an Iranian guest on pretty soon to talk about this, because Iran has spent decades developing a defensive military doctrine to counter the US and any potential attack that they can mount on Iran. So yes, the US can try to use air power to attack Iran. What's that going to do? They're going to end up with a lot of their planes shot down, and maybe with most of the oil wells in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states on fire. So how's that going to help them? You know, it's not going to work. Are they going to launch an invasion of Iran? No. I've said before, they can't even they couldn't even hold Afghanistan against the Taliban. What, they're going to go and take on Iran, a country with a still strong revolutionary tradition of its own, in which, despite the very real contradictions that exist in Iran, where there is a good number of the population, between a fifth and a quarter, that still will turn out, fight, and are willing to die to defend the country, and a much bigger number that, even if they don't like the current government or the current constitutional setup in Iran, will still fight to stop its subjugation by US imperialism. So this is not some primitive country which can be knocked down or intimidated by a bombing campaign. So I don't think that it was ever realistic that the US, or never mind its proxy, Israel, could attack Iran in a serious way. The bigger danger for Iran has always been US sabotage and subversion operations. So, for instance, manipulating the national question in Kurdistan, Iranian Kurdistan, or the Balokis in the south and east of the country, and also the running terrorist groups like the MEK, sponsoring like color revolution type operations, and tightening the economic blockade on Iran, or trying to. These are the things that the US is more likely to do. Trump's already promised to do just that in terms of tightening up the economic blockade. So the US doesn't have a lot of options. Now, what the Iranian agreements with Russia over defense, security, and economic development will do is it will start to further undermine and circumvent the US's ability to strangle its economy. That's the biggest thing, more so than the Mutual Defense Pact. Now, the Mutual Defense Pact is going to be useful to Iran because it will further enable exchanges of military technology between Iran and Russia. It will enable Iran to get hold of more advanced Russian aircraft, advanced Russian missile systems, our anti-aircraft systems, all of which will be very useful for defending itself. And it also secure more streams of income coming into the country, for instance, from Russian investment in Iran. So if more of that can be secured, Chinese investment too, then the US's ability to strangle the Iranian economy gets further circumvented. And of course, if you can find alternative routes to export Iranian oil out of the country, so land routes into Russia and China, for instance, and I believe there's also a new railway opened up into Iran from China as well, more recently. So the eastward push of Iran, even with the intervention of the Pezeshkian clique and Javad Zarif's pathetic attempts to grovel before the imperialists, it seems to me that the eastward drift, the eastward move of Iran is pretty much irreversible, and Trump's really going to help that. I mean, the clique that stand behind Pezeshkian were probably hoping against hope that the Democrats would get back in, and that they could negotiate some kind of pathetic compromise. Trump getting in a weird way is potentially positive for Iran's eastward push, because Trump's going to make it so there can be no compromise, because he's so tied to the most diehard reactionary pro-Zionist elements in the US who only want to do one thing, which is basically try to strangle Iran, that there's going to be no fucking chance of any nuclear deal. None whatsoever. Trump's gang will just throw it out, which is good. That's good. We should welcome these things. The far more dangerous opponent, if you're an Iranian revolutionary, is the liberal. It is the Democrats, rather than the Trumpite reactionaries. The Trump gang are so reactionary and block-headed that they don't understand the real contradictions that exist in a country like Iran, which is why Trump is excellent for the further development of the multipolar world, if you're looking at that, because he's very crude. He'll try and do some outlandishly stupid thing when it comes to Iran to please his political allies, and he'll end up only furthering the integration of Iran with Russia and China, and cutting off any chance that the likes of Zarif and Pezeshkian have of capitulating before the West. So, Comrade Donald, carry on the good work. You are doing excellent work of killing off the compradors inside Iran, much like Comrade Biden did great work killing off the compradors, or severely damaging the compradors inside Russia, by denying them access to Western capital and the Western banking system. So carry on, Donald, you know. Right. Okay, so it is 23:37 here in Perfidious Albion. Tonight, we have taken in some suggestions on new programs. So next week, we are going to be doing a 2-hour spectacular on busting anti-communist myths. So be sure to come back for that one. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing our regular look at the war in Ukraine. And on Friday, we're going to be having our regular series back again, Decline and Fall with Kit Clarenberg. So tune in for all of those. I will be back with you again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody, all 515 of you, for tuning in. Be sure to like and share the stream if you haven't done so already. Thanks to everybody who has supported the show on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. I'll be returning to you with the Ukraine war update tomorrow. But until then, here's some music.
Nest Bruno que